So welcome, you are in parallel session B, Innovation Through Disruption at the RIDE conference. So I hope you're in the right place, and we have a slight change of plan in that we're going to switch the two presentations around. So we'll start with Laura Bramer's session, take 10 minutes for questions, and we'll move through to Stephanie Marshall's presentation for the second part of this session. So I will simply introduce our first presenter, and we have Laura Bramer, who is from the Careers Group at the University of London, and her presentation is around enhancing employability in careers education through innovation. So Laura, please take us away.
Thank you very much, Philip, and a very warm welcome to you all. Great pleasure to be here at the RIDE conference. I'm just going to quickly share my slides, and there's always this slightly awkward moment, isn't it, when we hope that the slide sharing works. So I'm hoping you can all see that nice and clearly. I know that we've had a few technical issues, so we've switched the order around, but I'm trying to get into presenter view, but to save time, I'm going to actually just continue in this format, if that's okay, because I can't actually get to the slide sharing button, but not to worry. So my name is Laura Bramer, and I am a senior careers consultant at the Careers Group, University of London. And it's a great pleasure to be here to talk about the work that we've been doing with our University of London distance and flexible learning students. And what I'd like to basically illustrate is what I'll be talking through briefly today. We've got 20 minutes. And because the focus is really innovation and innovative careers and employability delivery, what I want to talk through with you is briefly touching on what our delivery has consisted of since 2018, when we first launched this part of the service. I want to also elicit how the student voice and student impact has been particularly important to us in our delivery. But the four key themes I want to touch on as well are global virtual classroom dynamics, digital literacy, alumni and employee-informed content, and also career stage, which has been incredibly important to the work that we've delivered. Just to be clear on what delivery I'm talking about, 45,000, 50,000 distance learning students within the University of London whom are based all across the globe. And since 2018, we have been delivering a series of careers and employability education to them. That has consisted of live webinars that we deliver twice throughout the day to cover as many time zones as possible. And they cover a range of topics from kind of core employability content, like you might expect, like improve your resume and CV and interview skills, etc. But also things like how to manage global teams and other professional development topics such as imposter syndrome, how you deal with remote working, for example, which clearly has been very key given the pandemic. But in addition to that live delivery, we do a different sort of live delivery as well, which is our career drop-in sessions. Using the same webinar technology platforms, this is where the students have an opportunity to ask myself or my colleague Liz Wilkinson, who's the other senior careers consultant working on this project, any careers related question that they might have. And what we found is these have been incredibly popular and successful as an opportunity for the students to hear each other's questions relating to their job development. So there's a peer-to-peer learning aspect. They also get to hear our response. And what's been really interesting is many students have said, fantastic to attend this session. I didn't even realize I wanted to also know about that, such as virtual internships, etc. So that sort of live aspect of our delivery has been something we've developed and grown over time. But we also offer some asynchronous delivery as well. And we've produced 2 micro modules of content, which I'll be talking about in a bit more detail later. And once completed in their own time, these are added to the student's degree transcript if they wish. And we have other asynchronous learning resources as well. But it's always been important to us to think about how we weave in the student voice. I'll be illustrating how we've used our work with the student voice group within the University of London to help shape our programme and also in our evaluation of our delivery. And we've also been looking at different ways of measuring impact through careers registration data that I'll touch on latterly as well. So obviously this is a RIDE conference, and I wanted to sort of locate this within the sort of research landscape as well. Myself and my colleague David Winter were both instructors on a world first, a careers and employability MOOC, which was delivered and produced for the University of London through the Coursera platform. And that went on to be incredibly popular. We had 89,000 active participants on that programme from around the world. And that gave us a really good understanding of how to think about careers and employability through the lens of global environments and in the digital space. We then, there was a report within the CDE that looked at how we might enhance that provision. And most recently, we've contributed to a CDE publication or forthcoming publication looking at distance education in a digital world from the lens of employability and distance education as well. And the work that we've been doing hasn't only been sort of the subject of research internally, but we've also contributed to the compendium rather of enhancing graduate employability produced by Advance AG. And we were fortunate enough last year to win the Roger Mills Prize looking at innovation in this space. So we're very pleased with the work that we've done, and we're hoping that it'll be useful to share with some of it with you today. I think it's also worth mentioning that innovation is obviously valuable in itself, but it's important that it's strategically aligned. And we feel that the work that we're doing in this space does very much link to the university's wider strategy, looking at this idea of flexibility and also how we can enhance our students' experience wherever they might be based globally. So essentially, we've been able to build a kind of careers and employability landscape for our students, whether they're undergraduate students, whether they're postgraduate students, whether they're based in one of our aligned teaching centres across the globe, or whether they are independent learners. And what that's enabled us to do is to produce a package of activities that they can engage with. I should also say that all the careers webinars are recorded, and this means we've now got several years worth of content which we've been able to kind of build up as a kind of careers and employability library, which is an excellent resource in itself. And it means that when we're working with our students, if they're asking a topic in a careers drop-in or in a webinar that relates to another webinar that we've delivered, we're able to say, here's the link to that session we did recently on interview skills, for example. You might find that incredibly helpful. And the works, because our work is located with the student experience team within the University of London, who've been fantastic partners at helping thinking about how we can communicate this service to the students wherever they might be based. What you're looking at now is a word cloud of the responses from students to our evaluation forms. After every delivery session we do, we survey the students to get their input into how helpful they found it, but we also give them an opportunity to tell us what content they want. We appreciate that because of the nature of our cohorts, they're obviously based in very different labour markets. Many of them are at very different stages of their career development, as I'll be touching on briefly. So we're keen to sort of give them the opportunity to tell us what they need. Now, beyond the obvious topics that you might expect to see in terms of, interview skills and career generally, if you also see there's interest in social media and how they might sort of present their career development digitally, what their digital footprint is in terms of their sort of job journey, internships, international work. We know that many of our students already have transnational careers and are looking to enhance that, and also career change, as I'll be touching on. Many of our students are at a sort of a different stage of their career development that perhaps we more traditionally associate with university students. And here's just a glimpse into how we capture student voice through our evaluation data. So we're very keen to get a sense of whether or not we're increasing our students' confidence in this space. We often ask at the very beginning of a webinar how confident they feel about the topic, and then we resurvey, do a live poll at the end of the webinar to capture that confidence. And I can genuinely say, incessantly we see an increase in confidence, which is a very strong indicator to us and the students that the content is proving to be useful. And then we reevaluate again. So this is a snapshot of a webinar that we've delivered repeatedly actually on how to promote your distance learning qualification to employers. And it's been such a popular topic, we've rerun it several times. Just checking time, doing okay. But I mentioned another huge part of the work that we've been doing with the University of London Worldwide students has been around our micro modules as well. So these are asynchronous learning experience built within the Moodle platform that any students can engage with in their own time. There's a combination of activities that they work through. There's also quotes from employers and alumni. There's lots of different interactivity stages. And the first career planning micro module that we delivered, we've now been able to get a sense from the students, thousands of students who've participated on it, what it is that they've actually taken from that and what they've enjoyed about it and what they found helpful. And I've given you here a couple of kind of snapshots into some of the qualitative feedback that we've gathered. I think it's fair to say that whether the student has got very limited work experience or whether at a later stage of their career development, potentially studying the course with us for sort of promotion opportunities, lots of different students have told us that they found it helpful, that they feel that it's kind of honed new and old skills. And as many of us will know, we're all working in labour markets and employment landscapes that are changing rapidly. They were changing pre-pandemic, but they've even, sped up since then. So it's important that the students feel that the skills they're developing are relevant to the sort of fourth industrial revolution. So we're really delighted to see such sort of positive responses from that. Part of obviously the change that we're seeing in the labour market is the virtual aspect of our work. Many of us were working virtually and perhaps in global teams even before the COVID-19 occurred. But now we know that even industries that have been traditionally reluctant to move into the virtual space have since kind of made that shift. And it's looking unlikely that we're ever going to go back to completely to the situation that we had before. So I'm just sharing these screenshots to give you an illustration into how we have made sure that the students realize that being involved in a global virtual classroom in this context is also going to be really valuable to them when they move to, or indeed increase their work with global recruiters who want to see staff who can function sufficiently and effectively in the virtual space. Here's a little bit more information about the micro modules that I touched on, not only the career planning one, but the most recent one, which is the professional impact profile and success. And the topics that we cover through things like the persuasive professional, the strategic professional, the entrepreneurial professional, and the market aware professional, these are all sourced by the conversations we've had with these students. So we know that several of our students are interested in how they might utilize emotional intelligence, for example, and how they might articulate that effectively in applications going forward. Indeed, many of our students are looking to work for themselves. Many of them already have got their own startup businesses and are using their qualification to enhance that process. So I'm hoping that's given you a kind of insight into the type of topics that we cover. But I think for me as a careers professional, what's been one of the most exciting parts of this work is not only the content that we're sharing, but the mode in which we're also delivering it. So I would argue that all our students need to demonstrate their, developing digital literacy, and that's something that recruiters from across sectors are telling us they want to hear more about in students' applications or graduates' applications. So the very act of engaging with us through a kind of global classroom is in itself an enhancement of their digital literacy. So it's great to see that kind of live skill development, which is something that we feel very passionately about within the team. Indeed, we've also been able to link with other initiatives. The University of London partnered with Bright Network to offer their virtual internship schemes last year, and we've repartnered again this year. If you're unclear on what this might be, these are short, so they're 3-day virtual internships offered across a huge range of sectors with some incredibly well-known large employers, the likes of Google, etc., PwC. And these were offered to all of our students, including our worldwide students who are based all around the world. So this was a fantastic opportunity for many of our distance learners to get the likes of these employers on their resume, despite not being able to physically be in their offices in London or anywhere else. It was incredibly popular. In fact, our cohort of students were the largest group of students who participated in this program, which is one of the reasons we're so keen to deliver it again. Even better, this service is now offered on demand. So if time zones or their work commitments mean that they can't make the activities and the tasks on specific times, they're actually able to do some of those activities in their own time. So this is a fantastic offer, and we're really delighted so many of our students have engaged with it. But we're not only keen to work with employers in terms of sharing their opportunities, but we also want to use them to inform our practice. as well as our many alumni who are based all around the world. So what we've given you here is some examples of quotes from employers who have also been alumni of the University of London, sharing their insights into what they feel the skills are that students and graduates need to illustrate from now on in this labour market. And I'm pleased to say next month we're offering our very first alumni career voice event, where we're having indeed some of the quotes I've mentioned here from staff within the UN and also UNICEF will be coming to talk directly to our students who are interested in pursuing careers within international development, which is another great idea of kind of linking the student journey together. I have to say though, when I talk about this work, and I have presented at various different conferences about it, one of the most interesting parts for me as someone who works in the sort of career space is the diversity of our students. So we've divided them into sort of 3 broad cohorts. Many are career starters, sort of traditional undergraduate students, as we might describe them, limited work experience, and they're looking to get more. But we've also got a really interesting group of students who we describe as career developers. And these are often individuals who've already got quite a lot of work experience and are using their qualification with us to try and give a kind of shape and structure to their expertise and to make them more likely to get advancement or promotion or specialisation. So I'm thinking of a student I'm working with who's already been running an IT startup company in India, but he's doing a BSc computer science with us to try and sort of further develop his progress going forward. And then finally, we've got this 3rd cohort of career changers who often have significant experience within one particular industry or sector and are actually looking to sort of re-pivot their career either into a similar area or something completely fresh. Thinking of working with a very experienced legal professional based in Ghana who's nevertheless using a postgraduate qualification with us to try and launch her own sort of startup business in the environmental sector. But we're not just interested in knowing that about our students. It's important we then use that to target interventions. So on the basis of those conversations, we ran a series of webinars called Enhance Your Career Stage. And as you can see, we kind of mapped the kind of common topics and questions we get around the content. And we also included a 4th session specifically on working for yourself, because that's something that we know cross-cuts all 3 cohorts. Finally, just to mention about impact, some of you may have come across kind of careers registration data. If not, it's basically looking at work readiness as a measurement of learning gain. It was initially a project funded by HEFGE here in the UK, but is now recognised by the Office for Students. And essentially, it's used by university career services and programme designers to enhance employability support. So the data is collected when students register on a programme and at subsequent points throughout their course. And it's questions relating to where people are in their career planning. We know that students with high levels of career planning tend to go on to more significant levels of graduate employment, etc. So the students are asked about what stage are they at in their career planning. Are they at a sort of initial deciding stage, trying to figure out what they want? Are they at plan, where they've got a few ideas and want to kind of develop on that? Are they at the compete stage, where they're now looking to apply for specific roles? Or are they sorted, as in they've actually got a job to sort of go to? And just to give you a quick glance, so this is some of the data from the careers registration survey that's been rolled out now for 2 years within the University of London worldwide. Interesting to see that we saw in the difference of the 2 years, this is all undergraduates who've completed the survey, slight decrease in the decide category and slight increase in the compete category, which might indicate that during the pandemic there's been an awareness that students need to kind of move more quickly towards focusing on their next stage of career development. So for us, the next steps include learning more about some of the excellent employability practice that's embedded within academic programs, and we're keen to have more discussions with academics across programs. And if any academics are from these kind of relevant programs are listening in, we'd love to hear from you. We want to expand our work with the student voice group so we can help make that careers registration information more useful and meaningful. We're looking at producing and sharing reports about specific careers registration data for different departments and programs. And again, we'd like to build on this career stage segmentation that I talked about, and ultimately produce further research project, which obviously is absolutely central. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I hope you can see how all these pieces fit together. And if there are any questions, I'll just try and open the chat box now. These are my details, and I'll be very keen to hear from anyone who's interested in this space and indeed doing some work within this area too. So I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see. You'll also have a look in the chat box.
Terrific. So thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you.
If you have access to the chat box, please.
I do. I can see it.
I'm talking to our participants rather than you. So if you have access to the chat box, then please do post your questions in there, and we'll take those. Two that have come up so far is, the first is, what about entrepreneurship? What about startups? How do you help students who wish to start their own businesses rather than become employees?
Yeah, fantastic question. And that's exactly what we're aware of. We did actually deliver a session specifically about entrepreneurship and self-employment. And one of our new series that we're putting together for the next academic year is specifically on that topic. And we're keen to align it with an existing project that's been running successfully within the University of London already, called Grad Venture, where teams of students or individual students can put together a kind of pitch for their startup business. There's various sort of levels of the competition, and then the final kind of awarded one gets some funding, some sort of seed funding. So I think for us, because of our career stage idea, we're aware some of our students are looking to start a business from scratch, but many of our students already have existing businesses and are actually keen to expand that, sometimes even internationally. So I think there's a whole series of delivery around that, actually. So we're not just giving startup advice, which is incredibly valuable, and introducing things like the business model canvas way of illustrating a business plan, for example, but we also provide support for those of our students who are perhaps beyond that, but still feel that they could gain some additional support from us. So yeah, that we're on the case with that.
Okay, thank you. I should have said you can also put your questions in the Q&A as well as the chat, just for maximum confusion. So if we look at the Q&A, question on how do you work with specific subject teams to embed employability into course programs?
This is an excellent question, and this is really where we would like to ultimately work, where we'd like to work more going forward. I mean, currently the provision we have been asked to provide is open to all programs and all disciplines, and undergraduates and postgraduates. But ultimately, I know from my own, I've worked in this sector for nearly 20 years, and I know that really to give employability and careers education the focus and attention it deserves and it needs to make a difference to students, it has to be embedded within the kind of academic space. It can't just be seen as a sort of useful add-on, a sort of nice to have. And we are aware that there's some brilliant sort of practice that's happening within programs. So one of the sort of focus next year forward is to really work and listen to as many academic colleagues as possible to find out what they feel, what career support they would like. We'll soon be sending a very brief kind of survey to some program directors to ask them just that, what they're already doing and what they'd like additional support with us. But I think that's the kind of gold standard, and that's where we'd like to get to eventually.
Okay, thank you. A question that's sort of anecdotal, I guess, but what if you have any sort of data, the pandemic, what have you actually seen in terms of student expectations around jobs, but not just throughout the pandemic, but perhaps because you have a global student body? Do you see differences in different regions?
Yes, I think when the pandemic first hit last year, we did rapidly pull together a series of support around specifically dealing with that and dealing with disruption within labour markets. And there's no doubt that different labour markets are obviously, everyone's at different stages of recovery. Some economies seem to have moved forward and then are moving back, etc. But I think for me, one of the really interesting outputs of this has been the explosion in remote working. And what that has actually meant is that's an incredible opportunity for many of our students, because it's now possible more than ever before to find, you can search on LinkedIn, for example, specifically looking for remote opportunities. Now, obviously, remote means different things to different people, and some of those remote opportunities offered in developed economies, for example, might badge them as remote. But when you read the small print, it's saying, you can live wherever you like, but you do need to nevertheless be in the UK economy or whatever it might be. But I have to say, we are seeing an increase in opportunities that really aren't saying that and are genuinely kind of, remote-based work, which can be done in any virtual space. And that's why something like the Bright Network internship is so exciting, because it gives our students a first-hand taste of what it might be like working for some kind of, large blue chip companies, but based wherever they choose to be within the world.
Okay, thank you. I think one final question is, we've seen an upturn, particularly in students deciding to take further qualifications, and that's not unusual during, downturns, during pandemics, etc., etc. How do you sort of advise, steer, counsel students about taking further qualifications rather than moving into their careers?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I mean, I think the data shows, and the research has consistently showed, and only recently the Institute of Student Employers here in the UK produced some work around the fact that we know that postgraduate qualifications are valued. And what's absolutely essential is work experience and relevant work experience. And that's true for undergraduates as well as postgraduates. So, I mean, our responsibility is to think about the students' best sort of choices and best developments. And, one message I would consistently say is, this is true whether you're doing a first degree program or a postgraduate degree. It's absolutely essential you weave in work experience within the academic program. And also, sometimes thinking about, do you need to do that postgraduate qualification right now? It might be that you'll get a lot more from that postgraduate qualification if you have a couple of years work experience to inform specifically the course that you want. But you're right, traditionally in any sort of recessionary market, we always see a slight uplift in postgraduate study, for obvious reasons.
Okay, thank you very much. Just one more check of the chat. Okay, so I think we must thank you very much. Really interesting, really great work, really interesting initiatives. So many thanks. I'm not sure whether we can do virtual applause or real applause. Whatever there is, it was really excellent. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. And so you will see in the chat, everyone, that there is the ability to provide feedback through our feedback survey, our online survey, which will help us to make RIDE in subsequent years even better, if you could imagine that. Unlikely, but it would at least keep us at this excellent plateau. So thank you again to Laura, and we move through to our second presenter here, Stephanie Marshall from Queen Mary and Education 4.0. What have we learned from the pivot to online? A case study of QML. So I hope Stephanie is ready, able to join us.
I think, unfortunately, just before you introduced it, I think Stephanie's just dropped out of the call. So I presume.
Yes, I saw that, but I hoped she would reappear. So Stephanie has been with us throughout the first presentation. We will ad lib for a second. Anything else you want to add, Laura?
Well, my second no. Well, I guess, I mean, if I may, if there are any thoughts from those participants in the group at anything you think we're missing, or equally, if you're working in an academic program and you're already engaged in sort of skill development and employability enhancement within your own kind of curricula, It'd be very interesting to hear about that, or to answer any questions around that. I mean, I think, again, we know that, understandably, many academics feel that the course programs they've designed and delivered are in themselves kind of enhancements and preparing graduates for moving into the labour market going forward. But it looks like Stephanie's back, so
Yeah.
so I will be quiet.
All right, thank you very much, Stephanie. Welcome back. You're connecting to audio as the message is. So I guess once you have, then please do kick off. So all this amazing anticipation of, will the technology work? And it usually doesn't for some reason. So Stephanie, whenever you're ready. And this is Education 4.0. What have we learned from the pivot to online? So just while we're hoping that Stephanie's audio will connect, there are a few questions and answers in the chat. So if your question was not posed in public, then please do get in contact through the chat, and we will respond where we can.
Sorry, would it help? I've just seen there's a question. Yep. Shall I answer that? So yes, at the moment we are Natalia's asked a question about how many people are in the team, and we are incredibly a tiny team at the moment. There's actually only one FTE careers consultant. And then we have a manager, Victoria Wade, and then we also get support from the student experience team as well in terms of promoting the work that we do. But we are very much hoping that this is a kind of something that we'll see grow, because experience tells us the more careers provision you deliver, that always exacerbates quite rightly need. If you advise people on ways to improve their CV, then 9 times out of 10 they understandably want some feedback on their improved CV, and that is certainly something that we know that our competitors in this sort of space deliver. So I think it's something that we hope we'll see kind of growth in. But yes, that's something that I think is important. I mean, we're blessed that the technology enables us to reach, very large groups. But ultimately, what we'd be really interested in as well is developing our kind of links with employers. We often get asked by students how we might get, be the kind of sort of brokers to some extent in terms of introducing them to specific industries and different sectors, which is why we want to expand on our alumni career panels, because one of the huge advantages of doing a qualification with the University of London distance learning program is you're then part of a ginormous family of graduates from a similar program who may be based in the same continent as you, or the same country, or in the same industry that you're interested in. So we've also been doing some great work collaborating with our excellent colleagues within the kind of alumni team of University of London as well, to see how we can potentially connect people going forward, because that is something that we're looking forward to helping in the future.
Okay, thank you. One final question then, if I may. I've been a dean of various different schools and faculties all over the place. And it's interesting that in some disciplines, students seem to accept that soft skills are very important. But in others, particularly the more technical, the computer science, the maths, etc., there's a reluctance to accept that anything other than technical skills are what employers will want. Is this your experience, and how do you convince the technical student that actually soft skills are very valuable?
Yes, it's a fantastic question. I mean, I think it's not helped by the fact that they're often known as soft skills. I think that in itself isn't helpful because it implies that they're not that important. Whereas, you know, the reality is, I joined a panel of technical sort of tech sector recruiters, you know, from large scale, you know, IBM, Fujitsu, you know, some huge kind of employers in this space. And what's really fascinating is if you listen to them, they're saying, yeah, we know you've got, you know, Python, C++. We know that your kind of, you know, your technical language skills are fantastic. But can you communicate with a bunch of professionals you've never met through a Zoom platform, just as we're doing now, for example? Because that's really what we need. We need a blend. And I think it's about, you know, it's our role to articulate that to the students clearly as possible. Anyway, I think Stephanie's joined us, so thanks again, everyone.
Yeah, so Stephanie now seems to be here in stereo.
Right, thank you very much for that, Philip, and apologies to everybody. I mean, I think one of the greatest skills that we've all been taught, and I think Laura, in a sense, was alluding to it, was resilience. I mean, we can say any student writing about the skills that they've learned during the pandemic has been resilience. I think we academics and staff are just the same. I won't go into linking with Laura's presentation, which I thought was absolutely excellent. And I know at Queen Mary, where I'm the Vice Principal for Education, we have been absolutely thrilled with particularly the Bright Network virtual internships. Those have been so exciting and so well received, and we hope to participate even more. But without further ado, I'd like to then present my set of slides on what disruption has taught us and what innovation has been in that space. So Mark, if I could please have the first slide. So in terms of thinking about the learning through disruption, I think that there's been a huge amount of learning that has taken place from primarily working in that space with students as well. So it's been so many not unknown unknowns, many of them have been known unknowns that we've worked together to resolve, and there have been a few unknown unknowns, which I think has maybe been around some of the government interventions and how they've responded. But if I could go on to the next slide, please. So in terms of thinking about where we're at then in terms of thinking about education 4.0, in a sense you could say that this is exactly what we're planning at the moment for September, in terms of looking back on what we've learned, what we learned since that lockdown well over a year ago, about almost 18 months ago now. And what we've learned has been very much based on what students have fed back to us through pulse surveys, through some of the innovations like better staff-student liaison committees, which we decided we would host online fortnightly. And of course, doing that fortnightly has meant we've had a steadier flow. We've been using things like Padlet and Mentimeter far more than we'd ever done in the past. So that where students have been feeding in, here's a good idea, we've certainly been prepared to talk. So, could I next slide, please? Thank you. Sorry, there's so much feedback. Okay, Are people okay?
There is a huge amount of feedback. You seem to be connected via 2 devices, so that may be the problem, because you've managed to by the second device.
Okay, let me see if I can. I hate to say, okay, let me see if I can leave.
seem to be only one of you now, which is probably good. So please have a go.
Okay, well, I can't see anybody and I can't see the screen. So if you don't mind, I'm just gonna carry on because otherwise it'll waste time.
We can see and hear you, so please.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. So we did hear back early on, and I think it's even from just wandering around campus when we had some opening and talking to the students, that students said they did prefer the asynchronous as opposed to the large lectures. What they did miss, though, of course, was the walking to the lectures or after the lectures with friends or having a coffee afterwards. But they preferred them in terms of being able to go at their own pace. I think we knew that from pre-recorded lectures, from lectures that we might have had video capture in the past, that they could particularly rewind certain bits. But also they liked the fact they could pause, chunk it down and do more research in between to make sure that they had that deeper understanding. So I think what we saw as a result of the asynchronous was a lot more deep learning taking place. Finally, staff as well getting what we meant by flipped learning, and actually because of that feedback from the students, believing then that there really was a case for pre-recording lectures, offering things asynchronously and letting students learn from that means, so that seminars and tutorial groups therefore were very much focused on issues that might have arisen as a result of those asynchronous lectures. I have to say, these large lectures, we were then in the asynchronous making sure they were a couple of hours long, but with a variety of activities within that they were expected to do, which might have even been quizzes for them to undertake to be able to proceed. And then next slide, please, Mark. In terms of most students as well, we heard that they really enjoyed, though, the synchronous, subject to interactivity being built in. So the number of students we heard either through those pulse surveys, through the SSLCs, or when we were able to offer mixed mode, you'd hear them saying, actually, it's so much fun. You have got to listen carefully because you don't want to be caught out if there's a vote or if there's a quiz or what have you. And students have been feeding that in regularly to lectures to help lectures then in terms of their learning design. They did say, and I've heard this personally from a particular student saying they found it much more intellectually challenging moving over to online, and particularly when we moved into the mixed mode, in terms of having to really think, to concentrate, to process, to be able to then engage in the interactivity, which might have been in the synchronous, but it also was involved in the asynchronous. They found it engaging, but also, I mean, the look on some students' faces when I asked them about it as well were saying that they found it really fun. They were worn out, they were tired, but nevertheless, it was really fun. I think that links with some of Laura's points about what it was like then operating on that virtual global stage, because I think, you know, universities in London are particularly global, and when we're operating with students around the globe, we want our students to be benefiting from having fun in those subgroups with them. The next bullet point about daring to ask questions, this is something that we found early on in terms of that engagement piece. And I guess this is looking at some of the large group activities. So say, for example, in 150 large group activity within law, they dared to ask questions. And one lecturer reported on the fact that there were 100 different hands raised in the course of her teaching session, which she'd never experienced before, because normally no student wanted to dare to ask anything. But it was so much easier to be able to do so with a virtual event. And of course, those were coming from around the globe. When looking at support services, which of course is really important to do as well, they like that personalized, confidential approach to student well-being, because they could dip in and dip out of, say, counseling sessions, even career sessions, in a much more personal way if they were doing it from the confines of their own private space. And that's something that we've got to make sure as we go forward that we've really learned from that, in terms of we've got to be able to offer them both options. And of course, from the autumn, we will be continuing to offer both options, because with some of the quarantine requirements, we're going to have to make sure we continue to offer as best we can in the virtual space as well. Next slide, please, Mark. Thinking about our commuting students, and I know this is it maybe is an issue globally as well, and I know certainly in the larger European cities it certainly is. Commuting students for us at Queen Mary is over 50%. So what is the feedback that we've heard from them, and what have we learned about that in terms of moving forward, and actually where do we need to innovate? Unsurprisingly, they appreciated the fact that they didn't have to travel to campus because of the cost and time. So just on the cost and time criteria, they said it was much better that they weren't having to spend so much time getting to the public transport, undertaking public transport, and of course that associated costs. And I know that's been an issue in many continental European cities as well. They thus said they were able to better organize their week. Now, at Queen Mary, we'd use student interns for various research projects in the past, and the students had fed back to us, it would be so much better if they were able to have things grouped together, so they only needed to come onto campus two or three times a week maximum, and when they were there, then being able to be really, really productive. So obviously now being able to have that bit of variety, I think, in terms of organizing their week, I think they felt that they could fit in some other things as well. Obviously, a lot have caring responsibilities. A lot of their paid employment dried up that they might have had, but there were other things that they did appreciate having the time to be able to do. Subject to the proper study space, many said they were able to have a better work-life balance as well. But the big thing they were all missing, which I'll look at in the next slide, is the fact they did really miss the social component. So thinking about, though, the thing that did cause us concern, and I know this is once again is a global phenomena that we had to work out how best to address: digital poverty. So we had to make poor working environments and lack of social interaction. So on the digital poverty front, we rapidly did a survey to ensure that everybody had the right kit with the right software, and where they didn't, we posted that out to them. The poor working environment was a different issue, and it was a concerning issue, and that's why we were exceptionally keen, once we're out of lockdown, to make sure we opened up social spaces, got our library opened up as soon as possible, and also other social spaces where they could come in and have access to all the resources that they might need to be able to study effectively. And in fact, going around campus, when they weren't allowed to study on campus, but they were allowed to go onto campus to be able to use the facilities if there were mental health issues. I then was talking with some groups, and they just said that they felt that if they didn't come onto campus, join with some friends and work together, they were going to go absolutely nuts just being at home, cooped up in a bedroom, perhaps with younger siblings, for example. And then that lack of social interaction, which I know was a bit tricky at certain times, but we're trying now to build that in much more when we're looking to the autumn. We've used our students once again to do a lot of work for us in terms of what they think students want going forward. Are there any innovative approaches they want? Well, they said to us, a lot of the innovative approaches they look to us to find globally in terms of simulations and just different types of innovative pedagogies. What they did want, though, was for us to work out how we could have communities working together online and also physically together, which is something that we're doing a lot more work on, and certainly planning for that transitions piece into the autumn. Next slide, please, Mark. So thinking about most of the students, so that missing of social interaction, and I found it pretty hilarious, really. You know, the thing we miss about lectures is the fact that we quite like meeting up with friends on campus beforehand, go to sleep for the hour or 2 hours of the lecture, go away, then wake up over a coffee, and that was fun. So you can see as well, it's not just the social interaction. It very much is that being together and going for coffee. And actually that's a wild exaggeration, because I'm sure that deep down they really enjoyed many of the lectures, and I do feel so many of our lecturers at Queen Mary are absolutely passionate about what they do. But I think that's kind of your stereotypical view of what lectures are about. One of the things that the second bullet there, in terms of they wanted to meet the staff, I found that a really fascinating thing, because it was as if it was so exciting. You know, we've been at school, we've been locked down as well. We've heard about what lectures are like. We've heard about what Queen Mary's like, of course, because for many it is a local university. They wanted to know what an actual professor looked like, sounded like, and how they might interact with them. And I thought it was so wonderful walking behind some students who had met their first professor, and were absolutely thrilled that, as it says there, he was so cool. They were so excited that he was really engaging, really fun, really wanted to get to know them. Unsurprisingly, they wanted to take part in social activities, whether it be sport, various societies, volunteering, and even just social spaces, because one of the things that the Students' Union said to me early on last year was, can we not have some timetable sessions that are just about getting to know other students, because we really don't know students well enough in our cohort, despite some of the Welcome Week activity we'd had last year. So in terms of us looking to Education 4.0 and what we're doing moving forward, the whole transitions piece now is going to be permanently embedded as a year-long activity where we do much more on that front. So, and especially thinking about this next year when students will have had, you know, 18 months of disrupted education. Let's get them into small community groups before they even arrive, so that they feel that bit more confidence, and also are able to share with others before they arrive as well. And of course, I mean, this is something that I really missed during the lockdown, that absolute buzz of the rich diversity of the student body. And I think being on campus, even being on campus now, where, okay, exams have finished, but we've still got a lot of end of year activities going on as a result of not being able to have graduations this year. We've nevertheless got some small group social activities for students going on. It just energizes everybody. As I say, walking around campus, from my own personal experience, seeing that buzz of students so excited being with their colleagues, their friends, whoever, it's just so enriching. And I think, is that surprising? No. So in terms of innovation, maybe we need to innovate much more in that space of how we can enable people to learn from each other much more and enjoy each other's company, whether it be going off piece in terms of what they're discussing. So final slide, please, Mark, is about what should Education 4.0 look like moving forward. And as I say, we're moving into this, hopefully into the autumn, but we need to keep learning, because we'll never be able to stop learning in this space. And nobody has the monopoly on what amazing education looks like. So we're making sure that we've got the best of both worlds, reinforcing learning, the asynchronous with that synchronous, and making sure we offer individualized student support in moving that forward. Plenty of community building, which I've gone on to, whether it be face-to-face, but how we mix that much more. So in terms of the ITS budget, of course, has been greatly enhanced this year, so we can do that within our different spaces. Supporting students in directing their own learning, supported by advisory staff, and we're looking at a range of new ways that we can do that, and of course many enhanced by technological tools. We want to facilitate learning in our assessment processes, which students have maintained was much more difficult this year. And then of course when they got results back, we're pleasantly surprised that they've done so well, because it has been about deep learning, it hasn't been about rote learning, it hasn't been about box ticking. And then finally, I think everybody has appreciated we cannot learn well without joy and fun. So the more we can incorporate that, the better as well. So it really, in summary, means innovation has to be within learning design. Therefore, learning design teams are absolutely crucial. I think that's something that our staff have learned, they've really enjoyed, and our students have really enjoyed contributing that as well. So apologies that I've only got 4 minutes left in terms of questions and answers, and I can't see the chat, but hopefully you'll have heard enough to be able to ask some questions, and I can be asked those.
Great, thank you very much, Stephanie, and well done coping with the technologies. There's a couple of questions. First, is around, have you experienced differences in different disciplines? Are there real problems for students in, for example, the more physical sciences than students in the arts? What's the experience across the institution?
Yeah, very excellent question, Philip. For a start, our dental students, because of course we've got a medical school, weren't able to have placements. That is major for them. And I think you might be aware that, I can't remember which university it is, where the dental students are doing an additional year to get those placements in. Certainly the labs has been an issue, because I think so many of our students, of course, doing the science and engineering, one of the joys of their lives is undertaking the lab work, which of course had to be curtailed. And no amount of simulation in that space has been good enough yet. We're hoping we can improve that, because we've got to think about how we move forward. I think where you've got humanities in particular, which so much dependent on seminars and seminar interactions and discussions to develop critical thinking, they've maintained that they've really missed the human contact in that. Although they've been able to do it virtually, they have wanted to be able to, you know, that breakaway, right after that session, can I go for a coffee now with my mates to discuss it a bit further? So there have been differences. Probably science and engineering has been the most difficult in terms of recreating the learning process that is so much dependent on a progressive way of taking the curriculum forward. So similarly with medicine and dentistry, whereas that, you know, application of theory to practice that maybe isn't the same in humanities and social sciences, but nevertheless, it's been an issue. I could just say something on the employability front. All have been thrilled across the piece that we've been able to host so many virtual events for them. That's probably an area that we did really big up, because we thought if there's other things that are now missing, we've got to then think about what graduate outcomes look like, and employability is absolutely key. So the more speakers we can get, and particularly getting alumni talking about what led them into the roles that they went into.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think we've got time for one final question, which is sort of related to the previous one. It's going forward, how are you going to decide what is the new mix? Is that going to be top down? Is that going to be bottom up? At what level are people going to, you know, individual members of staff, departments, courses, units, who's going to decide what is best for how Education 4.0 looks in your institution?
Right. I think we've already determined that, because timetabling dictates to a certain extent, doesn't it? And thinking early. Certainly not top down. I think that's a perfect recipe for disaster. What we have done is, I mean, we've got various networks across campus. I've got 3 deans from the 3 faculties that work really closely with me. We're really lucky with our students' union that each of the 3 faculties now from this last year have had their own students' union vice presidents. So it's been a real iterative process in terms of bottom up, feeding up ideas and us kind of cascading down. One of the things that we have said is asynchronous is here to stay. So students have been absolutely clear about that. They've been clear about what they want more of, and we've designed the curriculum accordingly. I'm rather proud of what we've come up with. And of course, further to the letter from Michelle Donnellan a couple of days ago, saying we can now plan for no social distancing in September. That's been great as well, because we're not going to have quite the mixed mode that we thought we would in the autumn, because we'll be able now, well, obviously we're still offering mixed mode as appropriate, and wanting to make sure that our global students are able to participate.
Terrific. I think we are out of time, so many thanks for a very, very interesting presentation. It would be great to have you back at RIDE next year to reflect on how did it actually go in terms of Education 4.0. So did the students really want what they said they wanted, or did they decide, well, we really wanted something else, but but anyway, so much virtual applause and many thanks, and many thanks also to Laura for her presentation earlier. So, and many thanks to our audience and our participants. So please do fill in the online survey for feedback, and please do take a break and then join us at the next session, which is starting in a few minutes. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to our presenters. Thank you to Mark for getting us over the line in terms of the technology, and thank you to all our participants. So that's the end of the session. So thank you and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.